Yeah,
stuff.
and most of the commercial electrolytes out there are just sweat scraping with sugar added to it. So they're not very good.
Right. Yeah. I know that you
Yeah,
like the Dynamite Dynaspark. Is there any others that you like?
just even apple cider vinegar is
Okay.
a great electrolyte. Ismine is a great electrolyte. Um, you know, and just Li3 is probably the main point for getting the liver working, and that's on the inside of the leg, just above the fetlock.
Okay.
And just brushing, the liver meridian starts on the inside of the back hoof, and it ends just up on the side of the belly, liver 14, and just brushing that with a brush coming up and over, or just brushing up the leg gently for 3 or 4 minutes will stimulate that all to work also. I know that's a lot harder than using a microcurrent thing, but again, all of these things you have to see if they can tolerate it. Because sometimes something sounds really awesome to the body and it's not able to handle that outside stimulation. I think if you can get their own energy moving well themselves, then you're going to be better off with that.
And I did want to cover homeopathy before I go into healing crisis, but healing crisis is so important with this topic, so I definitely want to end on that. So right before I go into homeopathy, I know you mentioned some of this before, but in previous webinars, we've discussed the fact that the body can't distinguish between emotional, chemical, or physical stress. The body just sees it as a stress and goes into defense physiology. So check in, see what your horse's priority is. And if it is an emotional thing, and I know the emotions are tied to the organs, but thinking homeopathically, I want to know what the emotional state is as well. So then you can see if the emotion is something that is your horse is bringing in from past, say that you just got it, it's a new horse, or and it wasn't treated very well, something that's going on at the barn currently, or is this something that the horse is trying to carry for you? That's an important thing to notice, because a lot of people have baggage that they don't even realize that they bring to the barn. So you had mentioned that liver is connected to anger and frustration. So I'll add to that that kidneys are linked to fear and fright. Heart is connected to hate and impatience. Spleen is connected to worry and anxiety. And lungs are connected to sadness and depression. So it might give you a better idea of what organ to look at if you're noticing some of those emotions.
Yeah. Well, grief is always the big one, they say, with lungs.
Before I forget, this is actually a homeopathic thing, but I thought it was really fascinating because it wasn't something that I would have, tied together. But I know that my homeopathic vet has done this, used this remedy numerous times because of this weird little story. So I had these little red bumps on my legs. They were incredibly itchy. They made me nuts. I was so desperate, I actually went to a dermatologist who looked like the most unhealthy human being I'd ever seen in my life. I don't know how he made a living. And he said that I was just shaving wrong, that my legs had these little red bumps because I was, using a razor like a normal person does, and he wanted me to shave down. So I went home and I was still miserable. I was still scratching my legs constantly. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sit by the pool. I couldn't do anything. It was too embarrassing because of these little red bumps. And so I spoke to my homeopathic vet, just she's a friend, and she asked me, what is going on in your life emotionally? Like, what's happening? And I said, well, I'm really sad. I'm leaving where I'm living, and I'm leaving a boyfriend behind, and I'm starting this whole new life, and I'm sad to leave. And she said, honey, you're grieving. Go take Ignatia, which is a fabulous homeopathic remedy for grief. And she told me to take a 30C dose, which is what I took, and my legs were much better the next morning. So she had me take the emotional dose, which was the 200C, and at that point I was literally euphoric. It's probably one of the few times that that's happened with a homeopathic remedy, but if you hit the right one, right dose, right time, everything, it's like, holy cow. I started cleaning the house, which anybody who knows me knows that's a big deal. So I mentioned this to her next time we spoke, how fabulous it was, and my legs never itched again. They were perfect. And so whenever she has a dog, she does small animals, that is very itchy, and there's no obvious cause for it, she asks, is there something going on in the house? So the emotions are so important. And most, a lot of vets would overlook it, and a lot of owners would overlook it because they just don't think of how important that is and how much it affects them. So I did want to mention that because that was my body's way of handling a toxic experience. So anyway, did you want to add anything else before we go into homeopathy?
No, we're good.
Okay. All right. So homeopathy helps to support the vital force. It aids in releasing the toxins into the bloodstream to remove the blockage, and it prepares the body to return to health. It can be fabulous when there's an emotional imbalance that you need to detoxify from your horse or yourself. Remember, I mentioned that it could be something the horse is trying to carry for you. So look at the emotions connected to the constitutional remedies. Anybody who's interested can just email me, and I can send the name of the book. I don't have it in front of me, that I like to use, but it's a fabulous book, really looking at the constitutional remedies and matching the physical symptoms with the emotional state. So sometimes you're going to look at an acute issue, and sometimes you're going to look at it as sort of a chronic or constitutional picture. So if you're looking at just the basic acute issues, some of them that I would look at would be arsenicum, which is, especially like a food poisoning. Nux vomica is fabulous. That could be for like a vaccine hangover, you're overdoing, the body can't handle it. Hepar sulf, whenever you have abscesses and those toxins need to get out. Thuya and silica are also for vaccines, but the silica would be for abscesses that aren't resolving, or if you're chronically getting abscesses. And remember, that's the main ingredient, I believe, in the ismine. So I think that's kind of interesting. Quercus would be another one. It's a very little known remedy made out of oak, the oak tree. So that one would be really great for acorn poisoning. So you could muscle test any of those for these kinds of issues. And those are kind of the top 6 that I picked for acute situations. Do you have any you would like to add to that?
Chelidonium is one that has come up quite a bit.
For liver, yes.
With that, yeah.
Awesome.
Another one that we kind of tended to forget nutritionally was gut healthy.
Oh, yes, fabulous. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, because it's an activated charcoal with some papain and cypriol and anise oil in there, and that is really amazing because living in the 21st century, we're toxifying every day.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to look at some of the constitutionals now. So I just want to mention this. So there are various detox programs that can help the body's natural cleansing process, such as resting the organs through fasting, stimulating the liver to drive toxins from the body, promoting elimination through the intestines, kidneys, and skin, and improving circulation of the blood and refueling the body with healthy nutrients. I did want to mention that. And so the remedies selected for detoxing can be broadly divided into constitutional and organ-specific. In constitutional prescribing, the whole body is considered, and tailor-made remedy is selected after extensive case taking. So that's not something you just kind of like fly by night. I know we muscle test it, but there's a lot to looking at the whole picture. I tend to try to make people say as much as they can, because I'm going to hear that one thing that I need to hear to know which remedy it is. So it does help when you get people really giving you a detailed picture when you're trying to pick a constitutional. So the constitutional remedy alone may be all that's required to bring about the body's innate ability to heal, repair, cleanse, and restore. Other times there may be a cause to further prescribe specific remedies to target an individual organ or supporting system. So some examples of specific remedies for a prescribed detox program. I'm just going to run through, I think there's about 10 here. So Berberis vulgaris is an excellent remedy to achieve combined kidney and liver drainage and detoxification. Remember, by the way, to ask the question, can it be tolerated before you do any of these? And, muscle test the doses, and always remember less is more. I just want to make sure that I can get to mention that. Chelidonium is here for gallbladder and liver drainage or inflammation of the liver, especially as a result of rich foods, alcohol, drug, artificial medicines, abuse. Vitalaca for drainage of the lymphatic system. Excuse me, I'm going to have to drink some water. Regan, you talk for a second.
Hi. How's everybody doing? The liver. What an amazing organ for
Okay.
back. I'm good.
All right. Vital leca for the drainage of the lymphatic system, especially in the case of glandular swelling during and after illness. But not this. I'm guessing this is not for horses because it says benign breast lumps, fatty lipomas, and cellulite. But just know that, mammals are mammals when it comes to homeopathy. Rutagrave for colon drainage. This is one I'm not familiar with. I know berberis, but I haven't heard the second word before. So aquifolium or calendula for skin drainage to enhance the healing of many chronic skin disorders, including spots, pimples, acne, eczema, psoriasis, and dermatitis. Phosphorus to encourage drainage of the pancreas and improve sugar regulation disorders. Spongia or Lobelia inflata for lung drainage, especially while using an asthma inhaler. Beneficials for smokers or ex-smokers. Helpful during and after any lung disorder. Thlaspi bursa, that is not one I know, so I'm going to spell it. Thlaspi bursa for drainage of the uterus and urinary bladder disorders, including fibroids, endometriosis, menstrual disorders, infertility, and incontinence. So just know that that's going to be more for the kidney, urinary tract system in the horse. You're not going to see a lot of the things that we see with the humans. And Nux vomica is a general detox remedy, especially after overindulgence in stimulants-rich foods, and excellent hangover remedy. So remember, again, vaccine hangovers are a big deal. So you can do a detox using, these things as long as it muscle tests. Be very careful not to overdo with homeopathy. So if you want to add anything there, and then we can go on to healing crisis.
So I just want to ask you, what are the ones that you typically see? I mean, most of these things we've never even heard or used.
So chelidone, berberis I've used for kidney issues, chelidonium for liver, rutagrave I use for a lot of things. I have never used it for colon drainage. Let me grab the second page.
What does colon drainage mean?
I'm assuming you're supporting the colon. Phosphorus we've used a lot. Spongia I've used, and Nux I use constantly. So I've used probably about half of them myself for different, but not specifically for detoxifying organs. I just thought it was an interesting thing to read through. So healing crisis. So anything that we've talked about can bring about a healing crisis, any of these different modalities. And so that's why we keep bringing up can it be tolerated? You don't want to detoxify too quickly. I know a lot of naturopaths terrify me, when it comes to humans, because they throw the kitchen sink at someone and it's just too much and the body is goes into overwhelm. It's very uncomfortable. I've heard Regan say on numerous occasions when somebody is going into a healing crisis and they can't tolerate it, even if it's not that big a deal, but they can't handle it, he'll tell them to go eat a cheeseburger, because then that retoxifies the body. It stops the healing process, and the crisis appears to be over. Of course, the healing isn't happening at that point, so you have to start over. Do you want to add anything to that before I read through healing crisis?
No.
Okay.
That's good.
All right. So you don't want to stress a fragile horse by detoxing too rapidly. So think of the horse that's just been rescued at the auction and ends up at the rescue facility, and they're so proud of themselves because they have taken this horse and they've vaccinated it, they've dewormed it, what else have they done to it? Those are usually the two biggest ones, but they'll throw the food at it to try to put the weight back on. And they're very proud of themselves that they're doing everything that they can possibly do to support this horse. That's not making a horse better. But the people that go on the other end of the spectrum by trying to detox everything quickly and be 100% natural, I mean, you still have to be careful not to put the horse into overload. So I'm just going to read through this. So the body is cleansing and resetting itself. It needs water to carry off the toxins. This is a time for rest. Be kind to your horse mentally, emotionally, and physically anytime you're detoxifying them. The body has an inherent desire for perfect health. We have the ability to earn our way back to that state no matter how normal or bad our health is now. But in the meantime, the body must go through an elimination process to achieve good health. This is often referred to as the healing crisis. Once it starts, reactions may be mild or severe. Expect ups and downs as it takes a while to get back to good health. In the healing crisis, every body system works together to eliminate waste products and set the stage for regeneration. Old tissues are replaced with new. A disease occurs when the body cannot make it through its natural healing crisis for one reason or another. The body is locked into a destructive and shut down place, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Symptoms of the healing crisis must be maybe at first identical to the disease that it's meant to heal, but there's an important difference: elimination. A cleansing, purifying process is underway, and stored wastes are in a free-flowing state. The body, mind, and spirit are no longer locked. Sometimes pain and symptoms during the healing crisis are more intense than that of the chronic disease, but it is temporary and necessary. The crisis will usually bring about past conditions and issues. People often forget the disease, issue, or injury that they had in the past, but are usually reminded during the crisis so that they can heal their unfinished business. This arises in whatever the body is capable of handling at that time. One of the things I'd like to add to that is when my dog had lupus and I had first found this homeopathic vet, we talked about the healing crisis because we really weren't sure how this was going to go. And one thing she mentioned is she would really be certain it was a healing crisis when the symptoms started showing up in reverse to the order that they started with, before I had found her. So we were looking for that sort of undoing. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to mention. So if you'd like to add to that.
No, it sounds exciting.
All right, so if we want to go on to images, and anybody has any questions, feel free to send them.
I thought we were covering feet.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Talk about feet. You want to start with feet?
You're our trimmer. So feet and abscesses are just a sign that the liver's detoxing or the body's detoxing. I've been trimming horses since 1968 and never saw a white line until the late 70s when they started using ivermectin more and more. I think they started using about 73, 74. And then all of a sudden we had white line disease. So most of the time, myself and Judy Center would, people say, oh, I've got these abscesses always happening. And we said, oh, you wormed within the last 2 or 3 weeks. And they said, yeah, how'd you know? And they said, because you said you had an abscess. So whenever you do a chemical worming or even a vaccination, you're draining minerals out of the body. So you have to replenish those minerals back into the body so the body can start processing. Because whenever it has a toxin, it will use up a mineral to buffer it, to get it out of the system. So if the body doesn't have the storehouse of minerals happening, it's going to start robbing it from ligaments, tendons, bones, what have you, to do that. And then if it can just dump it out through the feet, it will do that. And then you start losing training time. You start having defective hooves. So different things start to happen. I had a friend of mine that was a horse trainer, and everybody would vaccinate and worm their horses before they sent them in. And he had all these abscesses. He had like 18 abscesses within the first 2 months of training one year. And it's like, oh my God, it must be the wet. And I said, Tom, it can't be the wet. I mean, you've been hosing these horses off for how many years you've been training? Like 25 years? You hose them off every day? I'd say they're wet already. You're racing here in Seattle? Yeah, I think they're wet already. Everybody tries to find just a natural excuse for why that's happening. I said, these horses are just getting more toxic, and their feeds are getting less, so they're not getting the minerals out of their feet. So he put everything on like a teaspoon of ismine. And that was 10 years ago now. He has not had one abscess since he's put them all. And they're, and I told him, tell him to worm them a little bit earlier, like a couple months or something like that before they bring him to the racetrack. And he doesn't worm while he's running them, So the ismine made a big difference in their overall feet structure and as we said before, it is a little bit of a cleanse for the body, working with that. So that was very cheap and inexpensive way. Because tell you what, if you got a horse in training at $65 a day, and he gets an abscess, you feel kind of bad paying $65 a day for 30 days while the horse is trying to heal up this abscess. The other thing I use on abscesses is clay to help draw them out fast. Homeopathically, Hepar salt works great with that. Sometimes, if that isn't working, I'll use silica because it's probably not an abscess at that point. It might be a gravel. And something foreign in the body is what silica is used for. I enjoy those very much. So, with that,
the silica is also great. If something like if you have a cut that just won't heal or an abscess that just won't blow, that silica is also good for that. So it's good for a few different reasons with the abscesses.
Yeah, and then always a lot of times when Sarah could probably speak more to this, but when you're transitioning a horse from shod to barefoot, and you're most of the time people do this because their feet are starting to get so contracted and so bound up, and they don't have that 30-degree hairline, that they're not optimum circulation. And you start removing some of the bar, taking those hooks off the heel buttresses, and the foot starts to open up, and all of a sudden he'll pop an abscess. And a lot of times it won't even go lame. With popping that abscess, it's almost like a relief. It's like you taking the rock out of your shoe and walking and go, oh my God, I didn't know my feet could feel so good. It doesn't always happen that way. But, Sarah, you've probably seen that a lot, correct?
Yeah, actually, I'm dealing with a woman over at Ray of Light Farm, and her horse is in shoes, and she's absolutely terrified. It's her first horse. She's in her 70s, and this horse is her child. And the horse has been blowing abscesses. So I've increased it for whatever reason. It was only getting half an ounce of Ismine a day. So I've doubled that to a full ounce right now, just to get the horse, pumping that. The feet are terrible quality. So we're trying to get the horse mineralized. We're trying to get the abscesses to stop happening. And so we have the horse on Ismine. We'd like to take the horse barefoot, but she's so terrified because as this horse is getting it circulation, it's starting to blow more and more abscesses. And I keep telling her this is a healing crisis, but it's part of the healing. You want the toxins out of the body. I actually contacted Tom Teskey, the vet, to see if he had any articles on the toxins leaving through the feet, because she was desperate for information. She's just in fear. Her trainer is trying to tell her she should stick to the farrier. The farrier's never heard of such a thing. So I asked him, and the only person he said that had actually had any literature on that was the woman, the trimmer that's from Europe, Strausser. She was the only one who had talked about that. But I've seen the same thing. There was actually one before I mentioned about the horse, and I talked about this in the past with the hoof talk that we did. With a horse with a dewormer. But before I go to that, a long time ago, I heard you speak about the body being healthy enough to get healthy, right? You're healthy enough to get a cold or whatever, to get rid of the toxins. So I had just run my one of my gray horses through SOD because I'm going to be doing a titer on him, and so I wanted to boost his immune system. And I thought it was fascinating that as soon as the 10 days was done, he started blowing abscesses. And I thought, isn't that interesting? He's healthy enough to get healthy. And I thought about your talk, and that's the human eating boo-boos, I believe.
Yes.
If you would like to